The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will send two letters to the European Union before midnight in Brussels. The one he's been forced to send, requesting an extension to Britain's departure from the bloc, will not carry his signature. It comes after the UK Parliament rejected his Brexit deal, and he's now legally obliged to ask for a delay. The President of the EU Council, Donald Tusk, has confirmed he's received the letter and is now consulting with EU leaders. We're now talking with Professor Mark Steers, Director of the Sydney Policy Lab at the University of Sydney. Thank you so much for coming in and trying to make some sort of sense of this. All right, so we've got three letters, am I right?
Yeah.
Just explain to us what's happening.
I mean, the news is breaking now, but it looks like what he's done is he's photocopied the Benn Act, which is the law which says he has to ask for an extension, and he sent that. He hasn't signed it. He's had his civil servants' right to explain the legal situation as they understand it, and he's written some kind of additional letter stating out his personal preference for getting the deal done, for not extending still further. The legal situation is really murky. Again, we're being told that he's consulted lawyers, that according to the Times of London, he fully expects to go to court. So, you know, there is explosions ahead, I think.
So, in other words, the advice of his civil servants would presumably be you can ignore that Act of Parliament because Brexit was already triggered. The article is in motion. We're leaving on October 31st, and it doesn't matter if Parliament tells you that you have to do something.
Yeah.
Parliament can't control the executive, and it can't undo what was already done when we left.
I mean, that's right. I mean, they've clearly been thinking really hard about this for a few weeks now, because they had said to the court in Scotland just a few days ago that they would comply with the Act and that he would send a letter. So he didn't say that himself, but the government's lawyers reassured the court that that's what was going to happen.
Well, is he sort of having a bob each way? Because he did send a letter, he just didn't sign it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's right, that they're looking for the narrowest possible way out. I mean, I think the other supposition here must be he's got some political signal from Europe that they're OK with this kind of strategy. Because also reported this morning is that the French president is saying, just get on with it and pass the deal. So, you know, sort of positive noises for Boris coming from Paris, you know, seems to indicate that there's been some kind of arrangement between the UK government and at least some of those European governments.
All right, but let's talk about what just happened overnight here. The Letwin Amendment was passed, which means that there is a delay until all legislations in accordance to the deal is passed. And then they'll vote on the deal. So
they should have a meaningful vote on the deal, just so an in principle yay or nay.
This is on Monday?
On Tuesday, probably. Okay. I mean, Boris Johnson would like it to be on Monday. I think parliamentary procedure makes that hard, so I think Tuesday is most likely. But as you rightly say, there's a lot of legislation that has to underpin the deal if it's actually to happen. And that's what got this Letwin amendment passed, people saying, well, hold on a minute, even if we say yes to the deal, it might not happen, and then we might crash out on the 31st unless there's an extension. So the reason that this amendment passed yesterday was people saying, we really want to avoid no deal, let's have another guarantee for that, and then let's get on and go through the individual bits of legislation up until that deadline.
And did that take place after the Prime Minister had pulled the vote on the actual deal itself because he felt he didn't have the votes?
No, so the real frustration...
I have honestly read... No, you're not. You're wonderful, Mark. You're always wonderful.
Yeah, well, this is why we have you in.
I have been reading all morning about what happened overnight,
yes.
and I can't make head or tail of it. Even the points that you read on very reputable websites like the ABC's are like, Parliament voted to postpone a non-vote on a thing that they weren't going to vote on so that they wouldn't have to be bound by the thing that they voted on. I'm like, exactly. What are you people doing?
That's exactly right. I mean, the real frustration for Boris Johnson is he thinks he's got the votes for the deal. So, unlike Theresa May,
well, why didn't he put it up overnight?
Because the Letwin Amendment prevented him from doing so, essentially. Because it basically says, got to get all this other stuff sorted, got to rule out any more no-deal risk until we actually get on with this process.
OK, so the Letwin deal amendment is actually in support of the deal. Let's just make sure that the deal goes through, but at a later date.
So some people voted for Letwin for that reason. So they're in favour of the deal, but they want it to be done slowly and securely. Other people, it's a wrecking tactic. They really want to remain in the European Union. They want to have a second referendum. They'll do anything they can to stop Boris Johnson getting his deal. And that's really the story of this whole process. Parliament is so divided. There are so many factions, different groups looking for different things. They come together in, sort of very unholy alliances to try to stop things rather than to make anything positive happen.
Well, this is, I was sat up last night watching the parliamentary debate, and I thought, how much is the opposition to his deal an opposition to the deal or an opposition to Boris Johnson?
A little bit of Boris Johnson, definitely. Labour leadership wants to stop Boris from having his big triumph, no doubt about that. But I think what we have learned in the last couple of days, one thing that has become clearer, there are really strong pro-Remain forces still in British politics. And I think we'd probably written them off, thinking, eventually they would leave, deal, no deal, Theresa May's deals, Boris Johnson's deal. But actually, those forces who are saying Britain should stay in the EU are growing in political strength. And that, I think, is a new dimension to the politics that we're seeing now.
Boris Johnson says that he's going to put the deal to a vote on Monday. What's the likelihood that he has the numbers?
I think on knife edge, I think. When they finally get to vote on his deal itself rather than all these amendments, I think he thinks that he's got a majority of 2, 3, 4.
And that would come from some Labour, a Labour split, basically.
Yeah, essentially, in contrast to Theresa May, he's got the Conservative Party largely behind him. Her Tory party was split, and he's starting to pick off a few Labour votes. But he's lost the Northern Irish Party, the DUP, which Theresa May had. So he's got to get quite a lot of Labour votes to make up for having lost those Northern Irish votes. And that's the thing which is really the battle at the moment in the tea rooms at Westminster. Can he find enough Labour MPs willing to side with him to get the deal over the line?
Oh, that's the thing too. Now the DUP have said that they're not going to vote for the deal, and that's got to do with the customs on the Irish Sea, basically.
That's right. Essentially, he's given Northern Ireland this very strange situation where it will remain in both the UK customs zone and in the European one, and the UK will compensate the Northern Irish for any confusions or losses that this causes. For the DUP, this essentially is the beginning of a united Ireland, because it's saying trade between the North and the Republic is more important than trade between the North and the rest of the UK. And of course, the DUP being a unionist party, they don't want a united Ireland, and so they're saying, nah, no way. And already we're seeing very, very, very strong rhetoric on Northern Ireland from unionist forces saying if the deal does pass, there'll be civil disobedience, there'll be resistance. And so, that tensions in Northern Ireland are definitely growing as this debate gets hotter and hotter.
Is this, though, part of the problem that has always plagued Brexit, which is the unicorn, fairy, pixie problem of wanting to be all things to all people, and someone's going to lose out? So, as I understand it, Theresa May's solution to the problem of there being an island named Ireland, which contains one half which is a country in the EU and another half which is a province, essentially, of, people will hate me for saying province, but a country within the United Kingdom, is that you have to draw the border somewhere. And if you're not going to draw the border on the land, then either the whole of the UK has to be in the customs union, or if the UK is going to be out of the EU customs union, then the border has to go basically in the sea between the island.
That was spot on.
Right, so now that Boris has done that, basically the losers are people who would want to maintain the integrity of the United Kingdom.
That's right.
In all and every way.
That's right. And Boris's calculation was that those people would be politically rather weak. So, because there aren't very many of them in Parliament, DUP MPs. And so he thought, well, if I can get rid of them and pick up enough Labour votes instead, I'll get this deal over the line. And so he basically made a very ruthless political calculation that he could ditch the Northern Irish MPs and he could move and pitch for these Labour MPs instead. His difficulty is getting enough of those Labour MPs to compensate for the loss of those DUP MPs.
Mark, just earlier on you said that there was the resurgence of the Remain MPs. There's still a force in there. I'm going to ask again, and I know I keep asking you every time you come here, is there a possibility of another referendum? It's
growing, I think, by the day. I was really struck by the fact that 1 million people turned up on the pro-referendum march yesterday. I think people thought that their numbers would dwindle, that once Boris got his deal from Europe, people would say, OK, it's kind of done now. But they didn't. They still turned up. And in Parliament, those Remain MPs are getting stronger, not weaker by the day. So that's why Boris is taking these big legal gambles today. He knows he's only got a few weeks to really get his deal done, because otherwise those second referendum forces will really gather.